Should I tell you a little bit about Satan? That in the court of heaven, Satan is the district attorney. He is not, as Christians imagine, the enemy of heaven and the enemy of mankind. He's merely the person who sees the bad side of things and carries out the dirty work.
Something that I find repulsive about especially monotheistic messianic religion. With a large part of itself, it quite clearly wants us all to die.
A new consciousness is developing which sees the earth as a single organism and recognizes that an organism at war with itself is doomed.
Welcome to Deferred Gnosis. We live in a world of Gnosis Deferred. The primary purpose of Deferred Gnosis is to bring together contrasting perspectives to relentlessly investigate the whys and wherefores most are unwilling to explore. We will grasp those fleeting eternal truths necessary to liberate us from the shackles of sedentary belief. We will sharpen reason against the whetstone of radical thought. Welcome to another episode of Deferred Gnosis Podcast. We are on location in some mountain range, clandestine location somewhere in the Mojave, and I have the pleasure to have with me Luzia Lowe. She's a ritual performance artist, a model, a dominatrix, and one of the most beautifully empowered femmes I've ever had the pleasure to know, and a dear sister and friend. Luzia, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's been a long weekend so far, and it's only going to get longer, but in a good way. It's the first time I've been at this location in quite a few years, so it's interesting to be back here for this specific purpose this weekend with you. And I think there's something really beautiful about being able to record this podcast on location in this undisclosed place, and do it by traditional 1800s oil lamp.
No, that's
candles,
right.
Where we have no electricity out here. We are in the dark.
Right. So yeah, it does kind of have, because we just have oil lamps. There's no electricity out here. And we lost signal to anything. An hour ago, 2 hours out,
2 or 3 hours before hitting the final location. We drop cell phone service the minute we turn off the highway. So right. we have been, at the time of this recording, we have been without contact with the outside world. No cell phone, no internet, no satellite.
Yeah.
For, 36 hours?
Dude, if something happened,
we
wouldn't know.
We would be dead.
Yeah. If civilization stopped yesterday, would have had no idea. We're not going to know until
if
tomorrow.
Trump dropped the nukes and pressed the button, we would not know until we got back to the highway tomorrow.
How'd you say today went?
Today's been good. This is the first time I think we've ever been ahead of schedule.
Right.
With doing ritual together.
Right.
And not just a little ahead, but actually quite far ahead. We planned it very, very well. We gave ourselves so much extra time and buffer space to be able to get this done and do it right. It's been surprisingly a much more relaxing weekend than I anticipated, because normally when we do ritual together, it's just absolute insanity from start to finish.
Right.
So it's actually been pretty nice. It's been relaxing and it's been peaceful. It's been calm. We got to wake up and do a meditation together, do some stretches, do some yoga. It's been ridiculous. It sounds so woo woo, but but I never get to do that shit when we're hanging out.
Right.
It's always level 11 crankers.
It's always rushed. That's right.
Yeah.
So to give some people who might be listening some history, we've known each other now for
about 4 years.
About 4 years.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, I met you at a party.
It was
like
a
piercing.
It was at Pixel's house, yeah.
It was at a piercing party.
It was one
of the. Did you call it?
Yes. Yeah, it was one of the Aesthetic Meat Front crew. One of my homies from Aesthetic Meat Front, which is a very, very old Vanguard industrial noise and body suspension project, hook suspension project. They do ritual noise making and sound making based off of miking up human suffering through miking the hooks pierced through flesh. There's a lot more to it than that, but it's a family that I've run with for a lot of years now. I'm one of the members, and I was hanging out at the home in North Hollywood of one of my brothers in AMF, in Aesthetic Meat Front, and Shea happened to be there, and that is the first time we met.
Yeah. And I think there was kind of an immediate connection.
There was. We kind of we felt each other out on that night at this piercing party. We were all hanging out, dropping needles, drinking wine, and eating raw meat.
Dropping needles. Didn't we do a? No. It wasn't.
We do spin the bottle with needles at those parties.
That is how that went.
I think that's what we were doing, and eating raw meat and drinking red wine, which is kind of just how we always roll at that house.
Right.
That's the kind of crew we are. But we kind of felt each other out. I think that first night we ended up not seeing each other or really interacting
for
much
like a year.
For about a year, almost a year, and then we saw each other again about a year later at another Aesthetic Meat Front night. It was at our 20th anniversary performance in Los Angeles,
right,
at Lethal Amounts Gallery. I was performing there with Luis and the rest of the AMF crew.
And Luis Fleischauer, who's my
hook dad.
He spent a lot of time in LA, I know, but his home base is in Berlin.
Berlin, yeah.
Right. I had him actually on episode 7 of the podcast.
He's fantastic.
If anyone wants to listen.
I
had him on with
Luis is one of the most fascinating people you'll ever meet.
Oh no, he is.
Or ever listen to talking.
I feel like it was at the art gallery.
It was.
There was
a sudden spark there.
That is sudden spark. Yeah,
there was a sudden spark that we had been kind of circling each other for about a year and hadn't really interacted. It was at that gallery show for the 20th anniversary in Los Angeles of AMF. I was blooding people. I was anointing people with cow blood, and just flinging blood all over the gallery. I didn't know that was... Yeah.
There was cow blood there?
Yes, that was cow blood. And I anointed Shea, and we saw each other, and
it was
came up and said hello afterwards.
No, because we had been talking a little bit on... We'd been talking a little bit about possibly doing a ritual or something.
A little bit, but we hadn't actually hung out.
No, we hadn't.
We hadn't hung out or done anything in person for about a year since that first time we met.
Right.
And it was at that ritual that Shea... I had no idea that he was going to be here. Shea showed up, and I was loop-de-loo in headspace coming off of the end of that ritual. I saw you, and I saw the blood on your face, and I was like, oh my God.
Oh, you know what it was? I had already... I
think you had done your third eye needle earlier that night.
I had already done the third eye needle.
Yeah.
So I already had blood on me.
Yeah.
But what I think was beautiful, there was a beautiful moment there, because even though you and I hadn't been talking, just very little, we hadn't hung out or anything, you came right up to me.
Yeah.
And then we kind of locked foreheads.
Yeah.
So blood and your blood, and then we put our hands over each other's shoulders or something.
Exactly. Yeah, we grasped each other around the shoulders, around the back of the neck, and we put our heads together. I was so deep in headspace coming off at the end of that ritual. The moment I saw Shea, and he was a familiar face, someone that I knew, appreciated ritual and understood ritual from the few interactions I had with him already, and I saw the blood on his face. And I'm just drenched. I was drenched in blood, just head to toe red. And I went right up to him, and it was an immediate spark. It was like, here it is. Here's somebody who is on the same wavelength.
Right.
So I think that was the moment where something, it was catalyzed.
Sure.
There was some sort of tipping point that was reached there in that moment on that night where we both were bloody, from ritual stuff, and we were both sort of in some sort of headspace. I was just absolutely out of it. But that was the very beginning of a long and circuitous route, yes. Where we breathe both news and fire together.
For those who have any taste in decent films.
For those of you who don't fucking suck.
There's basically. Ninth Gate is like that's one of my favorite films personally.
Personally.
It's in my top 5.
And for Cabal Diaboli, it's a mascot movie.
Yeah, Cabal Diaboli is how Luzia and I have more or less named this ritual religious order project. I mean, it's kind of
relationship. It's how it's our collective identity for ourselves, I think, more than anything else. It's how we've come to think of ourselves when we're together, when we're working together, when we're doing ritual together. It's not just an order. It's not just a collective. It is very much, I think, the only way to articulate it or to describe it is a name and an identity and a persona for the bond that we share in this very specific path in life.
And Ninth Gate kind of is...
It's such an inspiring movie.
Right. So I remember seeing it when I was maybe 13. And I had just begun kind of doing ritual work from a satanic perspective or path. And today I would say it's one of the most satanic films ever created.
Absolutely.
I like it more than, what is it, Devil's Rain? Devil's Rain is dry. You ever seen that?
I don't remember that
with
one.
William Shatner?
No, I'm not a William Shatner fan, so I mean, I've seen a lot of bad devil movies.
Dude.
I've seen Angel Heart. I've seen what was it, End of Days with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I still love some of those. But
there's the Devil's Advocate with
Al Pacino.
Al Pacino,
just absolutely incredible. I love that movie.
But the Ninth Gate has become kind of a. It's been a soundtrack.
I think that one, right? And the Omen trilogy in general, but especially the third Omen movie, The Final Conflict, that and the Ninth Gate have been movies that you and I, Shea, have consistently repped throughout our relationship together, to the degree that after we finish Ritual, we'll be just spent. We're just annihilated. We're completely exhausted, and Shea will spend the night at my house or I at his house, and we'll just we'll get in bed, we'll order food, and we'll sit and we'll decompress from ritual space by watching the Ninth Gate or the third Omen movie, and we know all the lines, we know all the fucking dialogue.
I have to say, from a traditional satanic perspective, that is to say, theistic Satanism, Orthodox Satanism. Many people listening will know what these kind of differences are. But essentially, those
movies represent those specific aspects of the path so beautifully.
I would say Ninth Gate is probably the most pro-traditional satanic film ever written.
It's definitely up there. It's for sure up there.
I mean,
because it takes, as I already mentioned, one of the only ones that I think even rivals it is the third Omen movie, just because some of the dialogue that Sam Neill has as the grown Antichrist is just, it's a battle cry, it's a clarion call, and for those of us who are on that path, it is inspiring. It's like listening to Kennedy speak. It's ridiculous.
Right. There's something about the Boris Balkan character is awesome.
Boris Balkan is the character that inspired me to start collecting occult literature, collecting rare occult texts.
That's right.
I've spent much of my life trying to be as Boris Balkan as I can.
Sure. Johnny Depp's character, I think what's kind of fascinating about that is Johnny Depp's character in that film starts off as something as a apathetic, kind of secular atheist,
but in some
cynical.
But in some ways, his character is a mercenary with almost no morals or ethics.
That's right.
That book dealer,
but a self-serving
one. He's almost a devilish trickster character in his own right, even though he doesn't acknowledge where that archetype comes from.
Right, but. You know what's interesting? So right. Some of his persona you'll see from a kind of a Levian satanic kind of persona.
But it's an Ayn Randian sort of might makes right. Everybody goes out for themselves.
Kind of a cynical feeling towards
very cynical
religiosity and things like that. But towards the end of it, he's a believer.
Yeah.
He's a believer.
Well, how could you not be in that storyline if you were him? How could you not be?
And when that hot shit fucking him,
I mean,
how could you not convert? Right. I mean, spoiler alert, she was the devil in the end. Yeah. Or an emissary.
She was absolutely, I would not say the devil, I would say either a face of the devil or an emissary of the devil.
I feel like she was an emissary.
I feel like the devil is working through her.
Right.
For sure. She's absolutely on that, but I wouldn't say she's the devil herself, but is she a sock puppet of the devil in some way? Yeah, absolutely.
Sock puppet, that's a bit crude.
I mean, it's a term I and some other people in my life have used for myself when I do channeling.
Okay. So you say that as a term of endearment then?
I use it for myself. I've come to embrace it because what I do with channeling is deeper than just automatic writing or automatic drawing. When I channel, I tend to do voluntary possession. I am completely out of body.
Right.
It's full. Something else is inhabiting this body, and I'm totally okay with that. And that's why some of my friends call it sock puppeting.
All right. So I think this is a good place to probably go into a meat of what we share on this path, as far as what kind of
Work.
What kind of binds Cabal Diaboli.
Yeah.
Body modification is not. We do Satanism before we do body modification.
Yes. We do ritual first.
I have to be careful because I've gotten some flack because my concern is in the ritual.
Yes.
The religious experience. The ritual experience.
Absolutely.
Body modification, how clean it is, and whether I'm cutting or whether I'm suspending or whether I'm bleeding or doing anything like that, using blood work. I understand that body modification is attempting to enter more and more into the world of legitimacy.
Yes. And you know what I will say is for professional crews who are serving a role in facilitating newcomers to the body mod scene, into hook suspension, to body suspension, to scarification. Yes, there is a legitimate responsibility for them to behave safely and with cleanliness. Operate by certain medical standards, and I absolutely get that, and I think that that's how it needs to be for people who are facilitating new experiences for new coming people.
Right.
For those of us who have already been here in the trenches, slogging it out with AMF, doing this shit for how many fucking years, what we do is ritual first. It's not body mod. Body mod is the vehicle to ritual for us in certain ways, in certain circumstances.
Right.
It becomes a tool for us to achieve ritual headspace, spiritual headspace, occult headspace. It's about facilitating a ritual experience. It's not the experience in and of itself.
Right.
And so you treat it differently.
Yeah.
When that's the
So
case.
you have an interesting story. So before we get into the meat of that particular topic, I want to know how you kind of actually got there. So I think it's interesting, your development and who I see before me now. And so how did you come into not simply the left-hand path, but also in the sense of body modification, suspension, blood work, and things like that? So just kind of a quick how you got to where we are at this moment.
Well, with body mod, with body suspension, hook piercing, extreme bloodletting, stuff like that, because I do not just cutting, not just scarification. I do venal tapping, I do arterial tapping, I do all sorts of very, very extreme stuff. I started out in the BDSM scene. I had a history before that as a teenager with self-mutilation.
Right.
When I found BDSM and I became not only a member of the community but a working professional, I found that I was able to transpose a lot of those urges, those self-mutilation and SI urges, into healthy outlets through BDSM.
How old were you when you started professional?
18.
I
was 18.
Were you a dominatrix at this point?
No, I was a pro sub. It took me 2 years to work my way up through training from a pro sub to a pro dom, even though I was always dominant identified.
Wait.
I put in the work to earn my stripe.
Who requires you to do 2 years of prep?
Whatever dungeon you're with, if you're being trained by an actual professional dungeon establishment, the time lengths vary. They differ person to person, case by case basis, and dungeon to dungeon. For me, it ended up being about 2 years with the people I was working with. And then I continued to be trained in a lifestyle 24/7 gay leather house by a master for the next 5-6 years after that. So I've put in total of about 7 years of training.
Right. So for those who might not be privy to some of the nomenclature and terms, when you say master...
Master of the household.
Got
I
it.
was a functioning member of a chosen family in the BDSM community.
Got it.
Essentially, it's a tribe. Is kind of what it is.
I see.
And so I was trained privately there in the lifestyle 24/7 in a collared relationship with that house for another 5-6 years after getting my pro dom, sort of approval from the dungeon I was working with. And I was trained by one of the oldest and most well-respected pro doms in the world, who's been doing this for 30-40 years now.
As soon as you kind of became an adult, so as soon as you became old enough to get into one of these clubs, because that's 18's the limit, right?
Yes.
So as soon as you became old enough, you started on this.
I already started dabbling in high school privately with my own partners. The minute I turned 18, I jumped right in the deep end doing edge play. And that was how I ended up finding out that it was for me. And I'm very lucky that I ended up being the kind of person that I thought I was. And that I still am. I regret none of what I did. I loved every minute of it, and I regret none of the scars and the battle marks that I've come out of it with. I went through a lot, and I did a lot of fucked shit, and not everybody can handle that even if they think they can, especially when you're 18 and you don't know anything. I was very lucky that I knew myself well enough.
What kind of, so you kind of mentioned something that is, I think, important. So at that young, there's a lot of threat of exploitation, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And if you're a young, attractive girl and you're coming into this scene, there's a lot of seniors there. There's a lot of people. And
I've had my fair share of male partners being exploitative. I've had female partners be weird or exploitative or odd. I've had bad experiences all around. Those bad experiences for me personally have never outweighed the good experiences, no matter how bad they were, because I'm just the type of person who really needs to have this outlet. It is something that is incredibly important to me. And as I said, when I turned 18, I started doing extreme edge play with BDSM. When I became a pro-dom, I still to this day specialize in extreme edge play. I'm a hard sadist. I do not accept green clients for a reason.
I'm sorry.
But I had always had...
I just want to make sure... Sorry, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I want to make sure that people listening understand the terms. So edge play...
Edge play means everything that is inherently dangerous. Types of play that you cannot... under any circumstances, no matter how careful or safe you are, they are always inherently very dangerous types of play. So that includes stuff like asphyxiation or breath play, bloodletting, venal tapping.
Got it.
Like anything where there is an inherent carried level of risk that no matter how safe you are, no matter how many precautions you take, it is inherently dangerous and carries a lethal threat no matter what you do to try to be careful about it.
Do dungeons usually kind of try to decry or try to warn about that kind of...
They definitely educate about it. But most dungeons do not allow stuff like that in most sessions. Once in a while with certain clients and certain employees, they will, if they are very, very well experienced on either end. But certain things like breath play, they almost never allow during professional sessions if you're working at a dungeon. Just because the level of legality, just like the legal liability is out of control for an establishment, for a business. And I understand that. This is California. We are a non-consent state. So there's no recourse if something happens.
If something happens, no matter how much consent you give.
How much consent you give, even if you had it signed on a waiver, which we made everybody sign waivers when I worked at that dungeon.
You can still be prosecuted if you hurt someone.
Absolutely be prosecuted. The state will bring cases.
So someone cannot consent to be maimed or murdered.
They cannot. Not in the state of California, no. Which sucks because that's the kind of shit I'm into. But
maim, murder,
torture, get most shit.
That's like my search topics on porn sites.
Oh, same, absolutely. look at my browser history.
I think I saw it one time.
But
actually.
So there's certain things that as a private individual, when I was 18, I consented to doing, and I still love to do. They are my one of my greatest passions, my greatest turn-ons. That's kind of what I'm about on either end of the scale, both top and bottom. But as a professional, there are very few places that will let you do it. Not because they have a moral disagreement with it, but because at a professional dungeon that is a business, that is not the time or place.
No, that's a good point. And I think that happens in the body mod community too, and we have a few stories about that. But
yes,
what I would like to, so you're doing BDSM. What led you to specifically body mod and then your transition into blending that spiritually?
Yep. So I had always been interested in hook suspension, body suspension, more extreme types of body modification, something I always wanted to get into. And I had sort of, the more I moved over the first couple years of my professional life and my adult life into the harder, darker, deeper ends of edge play and extreme play in BDSM, I started to find that because I had never been able to get into it because I didn't know anyone. I didn't know people who could get me that foot in the door into that community. I didn't even know where to start, who to talk to. The more I moved over the years deeper in, over the first couple years of my BDSM life, I started noticing that the Venn diagram, the overlap between the extreme body mod, like hook suspension ritual, hook suspension community,
scarification, things like
all
that,
tongue splitting, all that kind of stuff, and the extreme BDSM communities started to merge. There was a blending of those two communities. You started seeing people who were into both. And when I started meeting those people,
And this is in Los Angeles, right?
Yes. I became very close with them. I became friends with them, and I expressed to them my desire to get into that as well.
Right.
And so I basically ended up sidestepping from extreme BDSM, extreme sadomasochism into extreme body mod.
Right.
And I had always been very spiritual about a lot of my extreme BDSM. It was always cathartic for me.
Right. Where were you? So 18 years old, you talked about you did some training in a dungeon to be a professional dominatrix. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
During this time, quickly, where were you at 18 religiously, and where were you as you progressed in your training as a dominatrix in these communities? How did your religious and spiritual identity evolve? Well, and was there something in tandem, is what I'm kind of wondering.
Absolutely. They kind of followed a very similar path. Water takes the path of least resistance in a lot of cases. At 18, I identified as an atheistic Levian Satanist.
Okay.
And I was very, very adamant about it. The reason why I was so adamant about it was when I was 18 and first getting into the scene, I had a partner, I had a boyfriend who was much, much older than me. I was 18, he was 42, I believe.
Whoa.
Who was very Ayn Randian and of hard COS Levian Satanism.
Right.
And he instilled in me a lot of disdain for other types of Satanism, especially theistic Satanism. And it was something that took me a lot of years to kind of deprogram for myself, and to kind of shake off and move past, because that was one of my first sort of really impressionable, formative experiences, was being told that this type of Satanism is the only legitimate Satanism. And when people would press me on a one-to-one personal level, I would tell them, I believe that there is some greater force of chaos or something diabolical in the universe that defies our mortal conceptualizations of divinity, that defies our definitions of consciousness or sentience, that we do not and cannot ever understand, something that is far too abstract and cosmic for us. But I do believe it's there. I don't presume to know what it is.
Right.
And people would tell me that's not atheistic Satanism, that's theistic Satanism. And I would tell them, well, no, it's not, because I was a young dumbass kid.
Right.
And it took a lot of years for me to kind of realize and come to terms with and become comfortable with owning up to what I had always believed, and stop misidentifying myself.
You know, that's interesting, because in my own experience, I was identifying a lot with the Levian current and the COS, and I couldn't wait to join the COS when I was 18 and things like that.
I still have a lot of agreements with them.
Right.
In a lot of ways.
What I had noticed, though, is kind of like you, that the whole time I really wasn't a Levian Satanist.
Yeah, I never was. I just really
I was way too spiritual.
I was absolutely too spiritual. I just really wanted to be
Okay, here's the thing, though. I felt that my penchant for spiritual expression or religiosity was okay. And then as years progressed, it was not okay anymore.
See, I came in from the exact opposite direction. I was told off the bat that level of spirituality, of piousness, of essentially faith was not acceptable.
Problematic.
In the COS and in Levian current of Satanism. And I tried very, very hard to ignore it, to stamp it out, to mislabel it, to misidentify it, to fit my square peg into a round hole, because I love fitting pegs into holes.
That's right. Well, you get paid for it.
Part of my job. You can look the
Spent 7 years training for it, apparently.
Videos up on the internet. But, I spent a lot of time trying to fit myself into a label and a definition that really was never me.
Right.
I had always been theistically Satanist. I just didn't know enough and was not educated enough to know that that's what I was. And so I kept really trying to kind of beat that down.
When was the moment? Because, okay, at this point, so when I met you, this is 2015.
Uh-huh.
When I met you, you were a strong Levan Satanist, devoutly so, if that word could be used.
Well, I would say bitterly and sort of stubbornly.
Right.
So.
Right. And I kind of caught that. I kind of caught that vibe from you, actually, a little bit.
It was very stubborn.
We had, I think, our first conversation was. You know what's funny? My first conversation with you is what you're saying right now.
Yes.
This kind of like, I believe in this force, that permeates all things. It's what I was telling you at that party.
And it was something
I had
expressed before to other partners.
Right.
Who were like, that's not atheistic Satanism. I was like, it can be because I say so. Like, I could not wrap my mind around the idea that I might not be a COS Levan atheistic Satanist. I could not fathom the concept that I might actually be a theistic fucking Satanist, because that had always been painted as a dirty word from my first interactions with other Satanists.
Do you have a particular juncture where you shifted from the girl I met at that party to who you are now? Do you know where that kind of clicked over? To where you not only realize, hey, I love where I came from, but this is actually who I am. I am a faithful, worshipful, if that's fair to say, devotional Satanist.
I really can't put a finger on a specific moment. I think there were a lot of small moments that added up. I think a lot of it was becoming involved with groups like Ascetic Neat Front, where I was exposed to ritual, real primitivistic ritual, and I got to be in a place and among people where I got to be in a ritual headspace. I got to actually experience spirituality and real magic. And there were no limits or definitions on what that headspace was supposed to be, or in what direction or what way or why you needed to feel this way. It was just an understanding that we are all here to experience something divine, whatever that means to you. And over the years of interacting with Extreme Body Mod and AMF especially, and Luis, but in general, that became a vehicle for me to explore an altered headspace and work through, I guess, a lot of my own ingrained reservations that I carried as baggage from other people, about my own identity spiritually. And so that was basically the first time in my life working with other ritual body mod artists that I was surrounded by other people who believed and who felt that intense energy, who felt that experience and that headspace. And that was, I guess, over a lot of small instances and a lot of big experiences over time, that was what told me, oh, it's okay. It's okay to be spiritual. It's okay to be faithful. It's whatever that means, whatever those things mean to you. It is okay to have magical, divine experiences. And that's not a bad thing. You are allowed to feel that and to have that, and you should pursue it if you can. And that's why when I saw you the second time in person, that was after maybe 6 months or a year of me working with AMF and having those experiences with them. And I saw you at an AMF show. Right. And that was when it clicked over, was I've spent, this many months now being immersed with these people where I get to be spiritual without someone spitting on it. And now when I see you again, now I can see where you're coming from, and I'm actually on the same page. And I just couldn't admit it before. Right. And I had to lash out at you because I could not admit to myself what I really am.
Right. So when did body modification for you become a part of your religious practice?
I don't know if I could say almost immediately, but it was kind of almost immediately. By the time I joined AMF, I already had an appreciation, having hung around a lot of the other AMF crew for at least several months prior to becoming a real member, that I found that the way that extreme BDSM had provided a spiritual outlet for me and been a way that I was able to be spiritual when I wasn't able to be spiritual in other ways at the time. I found that body mod very quickly became that for me as well. It was sort of a transpose, several side steps. And so I almost immediately realized that this was a very, very potent outlet for that spirituality. And from there, the floodgates sort of opened. So the first time I ever did hooks was spiritual. It was ritual. It was unique. It was something incredible for me. And I had already been spiritual about doing certain types of extreme body mod in the BDSM context. I had already been spiritual about that. Things like doing needle play, bloodletting.
Right.
So it was a very easy transition. I wouldn't say it was immediate, but it was very, very quick.
Right. And we explored a lot of that with us in our own
we still practice that.
Right.
All the time.
Right. So individually, body modification, bloodletting, scarification, these kind of things became a part of our religious practice.
Yeah.
Individually.
Yes.
And that seems like what kind of concretized or formalized our relationship in Cabal Diaboli. Yeah. That is to say, us working together towards developing a praxis, developing a ritual process, and then doing this ritual order.
I mean, as I said earlier, I think Cabal Diaboli is really a word and a name and a persona for our shared mutual identity. Yeah.
It's not, it's in a sense, it's an order.
Yeah.
I mean, we have matching tattoos. And this is like a seal of the order.
We certainly have certain liturgy. We have, as we joke very often when we talk about current numbers, we talk about symbology that is directly related not to just any old Satanism, but specifically to what we do together.
Right.
That in some ways is not quite the same as what we do individually in our own private spirituality, but what we do together, we joke about, establishing the caliphate, quote unquote.
The caliphate,
establishing the caliphate. It's putting
we're radical extremists.
Yes, we both are in slightly different ways, but in parallel ways.
Right.
And I really think it's putting a name to our shared mutual spiritual identity and the parts of our paths that intertwine with each other.
Yeah, something interesting happened when you and I started doing this kind of work together.
Some things. Like, let's be real.
So what Cabal Diaboli, it started off as you and I think it was around Halloween of 2015.
Yeah.
I had mentioned that I might want to do a particular type of ritual. Mm-hmm. And then ever since then, we've been doing these. And
I remember that year for winter solstice, we did a Hecate ritual together. There was heavy bloodletting. We drank each other's blood, like great quantities of it.
Right.
Like a large, significant amount.
I mean, that's the first time I did vein tapping.
Yeah, I showed you how to do vein tapping that night. I remember putting
this was a winter solstice ritual.
How to tie it off and everything.
So what's interesting is that what would follow is a Santa Muerte ritual, devotional ritual, and then we would go out and we would do rituals in San Francisco, and then we would...
When you would move to the Bay Area,
that's right.
I would come up to visit you, and I would do rituals up there with you.
And then we've then went out to the middle of a desert, and then now we're out here in the middle of the mountains.
And you forgot we also went out to a cave.
We went out to a cave at like roughly 3 a.m. and we climbed up...
Yeah. We hiked a mile in the dark by moonlight alone down a narrow, crooked, and circuitous route, and then climbed
another Ninth Gate reference, by the way.
And then climbed a cliff up a chimney chute in the dark with no lights at like 2 a.m. handing each other cords of firewood up this fucking chimney chute with no climbing gear, to get into this fucking cave, and then set up a bonfire and do a ritual that lasted like I think 2 or 3 hours. In that cave, we weren't leaving and going home until the sun was coming up.
That was a beautiful night.
Our catabasis ritual was fantastic.
So essentially, there's kind of a fire that kind of sparked off as soon as we figured out that we can further not only because it's interesting talking about this body modification tied to religious evolution. It seemed like with us, we were able to evolve both at the same time.
Yes.
So you and I immersing ourselves deeper into our religious devotion as it pertains to the left-hand path or traditional Satanism, but also we have an element of body modification, and we kind of jump between which one. They often evolve at the same time.
They often evolve in parallel ways. As I said, the extreme body mod community was one of the first ones that showed me that it was okay to be spiritual, to be faithful, to experience spirituality and religiosity, and to do real faithful ritual in a religious sense, in a spiritual sense. And since then it's always been a vehicle for me and for you as well, for religiosity and for spirituality. That's why I have a split tongue. That's why we both have certain tattoos. That's why we both have certain scars, certain brands.
That was a ritual too. Mm-hmm. We did a ritual branding. We gotta talk about that one actually.
Yeah. We both done a ritual branding, and that was a whole. I feel like that needs to be another podcast episode. That was a whole story.
But that was one that we did in the Bay, and it was the devotional to Santa Muerte, who is the saint of death, or coming from kind of Catholic Santeria tradition, so on and so forth. We both worked with her in different ways over time, and there was actually a twin branding. So you branded me with an electric cauterizer?
Yes, it was a surgical electrical cautery pen.
And where did you get that?
Oh, I actually got it from one of my clients. One of my clients years and years ago worked in an OR at a hospital, and he came to me for some extreme play, for bloodletting, needle piercing, all sorts of like specifically in the groin genital area. He was a hardcore motherfucker, and he paid me my fee, and as part of my tribute, he brought me a gift. And my gift, on top of my regular hourly fee, was several $1,000s worth of surgical and medical equipment that he had ferreted out of the OR that he worked in over the years.
Right.
And that's where I first got those. I still have several left. You can get them online, but California and the United States in general has cracked down on being able to buy and sell those things without a medical license nowadays.
Right.
So they're a little harder to get your hands on.
Right.
But at the time, they were very easy, and at the time, I had them from this tribute, from this client. And I've been using them ever since. Burning was one of the very few sensations that I could not handle. Even in BDSM, even as a masochist, I could not handle. And I set out to get over that. This was before I started doing true. I was always kind of on that path, you know that. But before I found like real anti-cosmic or Noctulian sort of demonic evolution sort of ideologies within Satanism, I realized that branding was a weak point for me. That heat as a sensation, burning as a sensation was a weak point for me.
Right.
And so I set out at that time in my life to overcome that very specifically. And so I did self-brandings for about a year, until I got to a point where they did not bother me anymore, and burning no longer bothered me the way it used to. It certainly still hurts, but it's no longer intolerable.
And I think that's an important point, and I think that kind of underlines everything we're talking about, and even with what we're doing right now at this very moment, even with our relationship, there's something about body modification, there's something about Satanism, there's something about BDSM. These are efforts to try to transcend. These
are all ways in which you push yourself and your limits.
Right.
At least if you do them the way that we do them. I was never just into BDSM. When I was bottoming, I was an endurance masochist. When I top, I am one of the worst sadists you'll ever meet in your life. And my intention is to push you beyond your limits.
Right.
When we do body mod, it's to push ourselves. I don't just go out and do a fucking suicide suspension. I've never done a suicide suspension. Not once. Because it's too easy and it's not what I want. It's not going to give me the experience that I need. It is not hard enough. I have to push myself.
Right.
So the last one I did was pulling myself up to pulling my own belay line for my kneecaps. And I know that you're the same way. You came in and you were like, I'm not going to do some rickety shit. I'm here to do some hard shit because the hard shit is the valuable shit.
Right.
If it costs you nothing, then it is worth nothing.
That's right.
If it's not hard, then is it worth doing, especially in the context of spirituality? And we are the same way. I know that you and I are both the same way with our ritual, with our spirituality, with our faith, in that if it's not hard, why are we doing it? We don't just do ritual in our fucking living room, in our apartment. We've done that before, but even then, we do hard shit there. We do venal tapping. We do live sacrifice. We do things that most people would never do and have never done. We cross the threshold. We go beyond the pale of any moral acceptability, even to most other theistic Satanists. And that's just the shit we've done in our fucking living rooms. That's not including the shit that we've done going out into the desert with no sleep, no food, after fasting for a week.
So, as far as this concept of devotion, where do you think it lies in Satanism?
I mean,
because it seems like
I think that
this is a thing we always have. So I'll just say this, and then I'll want your response.
Yeah.
So something we always say. We actually said it all day.
Uh-huh.
I'll say there's very few occultists in this world.
Yeah,
There's just people, not just Satanists. There's very few people.
Occultists or magicians in general. There's a lot of people who say they are. There are not very many people who actually are. Not at all. And the more you narrow it down, when you say magicians or occultists or whatever, that's a very broad term. When you narrow it down even further, you say, okay, satanic occultists or real devotional theistic Satanists, people who are really on this path, really on this praxis, who are doing the work. The circle grows exponentially smaller by orders of magnitude with every single adjective that you add onto that descriptor. Like it is such an incredibly infinitesimally small circle.
So
and it started small to begin with, and now it's microscopic.
People will talk about there's a rise in witchcraft. You see it everywhere, and there's curses against Donald Trump, and
that's not witchcraft.
You get this.
I don't count that. Like that doesn't fucking count.
Why not?
To me, because it accomplishes nothing and is done by people who have no discipline, no foundational praxis, zero methodology, zero fucking anything. So, if we all agree that magic and occultism are a type of black art or science that is based on foundational concepts, yes, it has a methodology, it has rules, it has a system. There are different systems that work in different ways, but different paths, each one has a system. It has a methodology, it has a concept of functionality, the ways in which it works and operates, a mechanics to it. If you have no mechanics, and you have no discipline, and you have no functionality, you cannot call yourself a magician, a witch, a wizard, an occultist, or a devotee. None of those.
So,
you have to
what
have
do you
a
think?
foundation.
Where is the gold standard for you? Where's the line? So if people lighting up candles and they're talking about where is the line for you?
I would say, do you have a functionality behind the way in which you light candles? Is there a foundational methodology behind it? Is there a system of mechanics that you can study and understand that is applicable almost across the board in your praxis? Do you fucking have a system?
Right.
Do you have a system at all? Or are you just out here lighting candles willy-nilly and thinking it's going to do anything? It's about, do you have a fucking system? I don't give a fuck what your system is. I don't give a shit if it's a system I don't even believe in. I don't care.
Right.
Even Christians have a fucking system, and I'm as anti-Christian as they come. But they have a system. They have a praxis. They have a worldview and a philosophy and a pantheon and a paradigm in which everything exists for them.
Right.
So they have a foundation. They have roots. They're grounded in some way, whether I agree with it or not. Most of these people nowadays have none of that.
Do you feel...
respect, you and I talk all the time. We respect a pious Christian more than we respect an occultist who has never done dick in their life. Right. Every time. Because at least one of them fucking knows what they're talking about, whether we like it or not.
Well, the Christian's usually less annoying.
Yeah.
So... It's true. It's fucking true, dude. It's fucking true.
Harsh but true. Yes, absolutely.
So we talked about how much we, when we do this, we try to push our boundaries further and further.
Yes, absolutely.
There's something tied to the amount of sacrifice we make.
Yes.
So
as we talked about, if it's not hard and it doesn't hurt, is it worthwhile? Is it valuable?
There's something about that is connected to our religious expression.
Yes.
Philosophically, religiously, spiritually, right?
Well, because in a lot of ways, we are very Christian. We are very Catholic. Even though we are neither of those things, our faith expresses and manifests itself in similar ways. In that sacrifice and devotion and service and
you're gonna blow
piety.
people's minds away right now saying that word.
I don't give a fuck. It took me a long time to even acknowledge being theistic. And now that I'm here... I don't give a fuck. I'll tell you right now, I'm probably closer to a Catholic than I am to more Satanists. Because I give a fuck about what I do for my God.
Right.
It's about sacrifice. It's about strife. It's about suffering. It's about how valuable is what you do.
Do you think it is necessary to do some of the things we're discussing? So to do some of fasting, or to do ascetic practices, or to go out into solitude
to risk breaking both your legs and climb a cliff in the dark.
Do you think that's necessary as part of the cult?
Occult
practice.
I think it depends on what type of practice of the occult you're in. Not all of them will demand that, and not all of them need to. They have their own gauntlets in their own ways that I may not conceive of or understand, that to me may look easy, but maybe are not. I'm not one to gatekeep. I think that every occult praxis and every path has its gauntlets and it has its sacrifices, or at least if it's a real one, it does and it should. I think that for the path we are on, specifically, this is what we have to do. This is the way it has to be. This is the type of sacrifice that is demanded of us. And it's not the type of sacrifice that is demanded of everyone. I can't say that people from the right-hand pillar of occultism are going to practice or be devotional in this, or sacrificial in the same way that you and I are. I would not expect them to be. I expect that the mindset would be very similar, but I don't necessarily think that it would manifest in exactly the same way, and it doesn't necessarily need to. The question is, to you, individually, where you are in your life and on the path that you're on, does it challenge you, and in what way? Because to us, what we do is challenging, and it is difficult, and it requires sacrifice. It is hard. There are other things that to other people are very difficult and require challenge and sacrifice and discipline in a way that I don't do and that I don't fully understand. But it's a matter of, is that element there, no matter what it looks like?
We're in a mountain range here in the Mojave.
Yep.
Your family has a cabin out here.
Yes.
And it's a really nice cabin. This isn't
gorgeous.
like...
It's nice, even though there's no electricity, but at least we have running water, which is a far cry better than the last time we tried to do a ritual like this.
Because the last time we did... That was in Anza Borrego. And Anza Borrego is just...
Oh, it was just...
It's a shit storm. It's not...
You walk outside the car and you're like, oh, I'm going to die. Like now.
Well, that's a place that if your car breaks down...
Oh, you're fucked. You're dead.
And if you can't get back to the nearest...
No. The deeper
because your phone's dead and internet's dead.
There's no service. There's no reception. The deeper we went out, so we spent 4 or 5 hours driving out just to get to the limits of the desert, the high, deep desert in out near the Mexican border, right? So we spend the day driving out there.
Right.
We get there, and then we spent another 4 hours driving past the cell phone reception limit. And the further we got, the more nervous I became.
The reality is, because we got stuck in a couple of ditches.
Yeah, we did. We got stuck a few times.
A few times. And I had to shovel.
We had to shovel. We had to dig.
I had to shovel the tire out because it was the tire was digging into the sand.
Sand stuck. But it was bad.
Where we are now is far cry better than where we are at that first Evocation.
Much nicer. Yeah, we may not have electricity, but the first time it was like, we
got some candles.
We got candles.
We got candles.
We got 1800s oil lamps.
Ebenezer Scrooge.
Dude, we have some flashlights and we have running water.
You're right.
Like,
so here.
Good God.
So right.
It's so much better. We
so
didn't even use the tent the last time we were there.
Right. So to kind of paint the picture for people listening, we're in a mountain range somewhere in the Mojave, but there's when you say Mojave, people are thinking of the desert. It is kind of on the dry side, but there's trees surrounding us everywhere.
This is literally
there's a forest all around us.
Yes, this is a mountain range that rises up literally out of the floor of the Mojave Desert. So down at the base of the mountain, it is Mojave ass fucking detention camp desert out there.
It's bleak.
It is bleak as fuck.
So at this moment we spent the last day in prayer, meditation.
Yes.
We've had an ascetic practice where we've avoided certain things. So we've had an ascetic practice.
Yep.
And today we spent the whole day simply constructing the magic circle.
Yes. From the moment we woke up to now.
Which is over 12 hours later.
Moment, yes.
More than 12 hours. It's 14 hours.
Well over. About 14 hours later. From the moment we woke up to now, as we are recording this, we have spent the entire day in meditation, cultivating the headspace, in preparing. We already did one ritual today to prepare all of our tools, our magical tools and everything, to consecrate.
We have to do a ritual. We have to do a ritual just to consecrate the things. We had to do the ritual.
We had to do like 2 hours of prepping and doing a ritual just to consecrate all the tools that we're going to use for the ritual that we're about to walk into as soon as we finish this podcast. So we've spent literally from the moment that I woke up at before 9 a.m., which if anyone knows me, like that does not happen. I woke up at 8:45 this morning and was like, fuck, I have to do ritual. I gotta do the get the ball rolling.
So let's kind of paint the picture, because we're going to be going to the ritual chamber very soon. Mm-hmm. So we're in the back room of the cabin.
Yes.
Because it kind of has this main hall.
It's got a main front room. Yeah.
That has glass panels on all sides.
On 3 sides, yeah. So it's got floor to ceiling, glass walls.
Right.
On 3 sides.
We have a magic circle down that takes up most of the floor.
The front largest, the tallest, because it's a sloped roof, the tallest side and the widest side of the front room of glass, those doors open up. They're double doors. You can fold them open to be open
to
air,
a wooden deck.
To a wooden deck that overlooks a cliff and a stream,
mountain range,
and the mountain,
and
the
just trees for
range.
miles.
Trees for as far as your
It's
eye
beautiful.
Can see.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
It's beautiful out here.
So
we have the front doors open. We've got the blinds up. We've got forest and open air glass.
And the moon is so bright right now.
So bright.
I mean, we went out there to take a break a second ago.
And
the moon is so bright. It's almost bright enough to read something.
I can see individual trees back for like a mile into the forest. Off the deck.
Right. And we still found time to record a podcast.
Because we're ballers. Dude.
That's funny.
We're just out here going hard in the paint, dude.
Right. But
so we're in the back room right now in this little wooden
also
room.
The sleeping area,
the sleeping area, the bedroom. We're recording this by 2 candles and 2 1800s style, like legitimately, like they're all glass.
It's like bell book and candle style, dude.
They're all glass oil lamps.
Right.
Like some Ebenezer Scrooge looking shit.
Right.
And we're back here because it has better audio resonance. than the front room, because the front room is open to the entire mountain, because we folded the doors open the first thing in the morning.
It's because
open the fucking double doors up, and we're like, it's gonna be in nature.
Right. You guys will hear like bats and animals and stuff.
There's like bullfrogs and shit out there.
So people listening who are interested in your story and interested in kind of connecting, where would you like to direct them?
I mostly work off of my Instagram. It's my Instagram handle is at LUZIA LOWE, Luzia Lowe. It's my Instagram.
Right.
That's kind of where I'm most active, and I also, along with Shea, maintain the Cabal Diaboli Instagram page as well.
Which is at Cabal, CABALDIABOLI. On Instagram.
Yes,
and we'll be updating that with a lot of our recent antics too.
Yes,
but
we still have a lot of stuff to update from the last time we attempted this particular working.
Right.
Because this is the second time we've taken a run at this working. The first time was good, and it was a fantastic learning experience. If we want to talk a little bit before we sign off about the amount of labor we put into doing this.
Right.
Because this is our second attempt at this particular working, this evocation that we're about to do, within a few minutes now. And the first time, and between then and now, we have spent so much time, especially Shea, doing so much labor to not only translate old grimoires.
Right. Primarily we're pulling from, the current operation that Luzia and I have been focusing on is we're pulling the operations from the Grimorium Verum and the Grand Grimoire, or La Dragon Rouge, and we're adapting this to our particular praxis.
Yes.
To our particular practice.
Those grimoires are very specifically Catholically minded. They're very right-hand pillar minded. They are very Christian.
Everything from the length of a wooden rod to how orations are prepared to how a mixture is done. So we're adapting herbal mixtures in order to adapt them to...
I just have to give a shout out to Shea right now, dude. Like I can't even begin to describe the amount of work that Shea has put into this, more so than even I have, and I've put in quite a lot. Shea has spent weeks basically translating both of these grimoires from what is essentially Middle English, and not only translating the original text, but depuzzling them, because they are specifically written out of order very intentionally in order to confuse readers and make it that much more difficult to understand what the operation is, what the fundamental steps are.
Right.
And then on top of translating, depuzzling and rearranging portions of the text after translating, then he went through and we both together spent hours and hours transposing all of that text, all of the herbs listed, the actions, the litanies listed, transposing all of those from what is essentially a very Solomonic Catholic viewpoint into theistic, devotional, satanic praxis.
Right.
And then I on my own spent weeks engineering how we're going to draw down the circles to make them
that's right. And you did a wonderful job.
Yeah, geographically compass aligned, have accurate quadrants, be able to fit all of the concentric circles and the triangle of manifestation and everything. It's been translation. It's been engineering and mathematics and geometry. It's literally...
That's one way of calling it.
I literally feel like I'm going through my fucking SATs again, dude. Like I'm doing everything that they taught me in high school
man.
that I never thought I would use, and here I am using it for the devil. So if I could go back and tell my geometry teacher that, like, hey,
I put your skills to use, dude.
I finally used your fucking method for drawing an isosceles triangle, like, they would be horrified.
Right.
But I'm very proud. So
right.
You know what? We have a lot to be proud of right now.
That's right. Needless to say, what we're doing tonight has been it's been a couple of months of work. And in a sense, it's been a buildup of work from the first day we met.
Yes.
To this moment. And this is, I think it's fair to say, this weekend is a culmination of not only where we come from individually, but what we've grown into together.
You know what, though? What I will say, I think the beautiful thing about our working relationship and our friendship is that we say that about every single ritual we do. Because every single time we push ourselves farther, we do more, we do harder, we go more extreme. Every single time.
And I think we're really hard on ourselves too, you know?
We are. But every single ritual
I think
we
we
sit
demand
there
a lot
and we
from
say,
each other and
we
ourselves.
say, we've spent our whole friendship working up to this. And we mean it. And we really mean it because we have. And then the next ritual, we go even harder and even farther, and we say the same words again. So these are not words that I've never heard before from you.
Right.
We say this every fucking time because we are constantly challenging ourselves and each other.
That's right.
And I think that's the beautiful thing about the way we work together, because this is not the first time that we've felt this way about what we are about to do.
At Luzia Lowe on Instagram. That's
Yes.
your main hub.
Yep.
And then Luzia Lowe, they'll find you on Facebook.
Yeah,
Tumblr.
I'm wherever, but Instagram is really my main thing, and if you check out either me or Shea, I'm sure most of you are already following Shea if you're listening to this. Follow Cabal Diaboli.
It's time to reach on to the other side, Luzia. Thank you so much.
It's time to go down that circuitous route
and play the greatest of all games.
and win.
All right.
Uh-huh.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Ave and highest cheers. Thank you for listening and lending your ears to the Deferred Gnosis Podcast. If you wish to connect, please use the contact information in the description below. You can find all the previous episodes and everything else about the podcast at deferredgnosis.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, iTunes, etc., or reach us by email at deferredgnosis@gmail.com. Please send me your topic ideas, suggestions, commentary, things you might want us to discuss. Help us carve out a niche of truth, finding some ground just on the edge of the fringe. And if you're a musician or artist of any kind, please feel free to send me a link of your work. I'd be happy to showcase your work and possibly interview you for the show. Until next time, thank you for listening, and highest cheers from Deferred Gnosis. Ave, hails, as above, so below. Whoa! You didn't cheers on the lot. Come on, we didn't cheers.
Cheers.